Captain, we have them. We've established Transporter Lock, the Star Trek podcast. Join Ken and crew each week as they explore strange new episodes, seek out new plots and new characters, and boldly go where no podcast has gone before.
Hello, and welcome to Transporter Lock for Starfleet Academy, Season 1, Episodes 5 and 6. I'm Cadet Staci Lee.
And I'm Chief Engineer Ken Gagne, and welcome to the show. Hello, Cadet Staci. How are you this week?
I'm doing well. How are you, Ken?
I am great. I just had a wonderful Valentine's Day. So for those tuning in, that means that this is the week of February 15th, 2026. And we're reviewing the latest 2 episodes of Transporter Lock.
Exciting.
It is. And thank you once again for joining me on this journey. It's been delightful to have your fresh perspective on the franchise.
Thank you. And I've actually told a couple of people that in real life that not necessarily about this podcast, but I've gotten into Starfleet Academy as a novice Star Trekkie. And I would encourage them, if they had that same desire, to get into Star Trek, but getting overwhelmed with the 900 plus episodes of Star Trek universe right now, being able to start small. And I think that was helpful.
Yeah. However, of course, there will be things that you will not get or miss or overlook. As we saw in this latest episode that we'll be reviewing, episode 5, series Acclimation Mill. Of course, that being the acronym SAM, one of the main characters on the show.
One of my very, very favorites. I love Sam. Why do you love Sam? I love Sam because, well, first of all, I think that I really love the actor that they chose. She has really embraced, that very curious, childlike, and also you can kind of tell by this episode, she just wants to be she wants her own kind of friend group. She wants to be part of something. She wants to be part of a community, and if not, be the popular kid. And so being able to have like secret handshakes and all these different things, it's something that she really enjoys. And the actor portrays this really, really well.
Do you feel that Sam is just the latest in a long line of Star Trek characters who are trying to be more human, like Spock, Data, and the Doctor from Voyager, and Odo, the Changeling?
As we come to find out, because Sam has to report to the makers, I feel that it is a little bit more of the let me understand how humans are, so much more than let me become a human, because so many of her friends are, she's got Kionian friends, and she's got other Klingon friends, and she's got friends that are from very, very diverse backgrounds. So being human, I don't think is necessarily the impetus for her, her friendships. It's more, how can I explain to the makers how organics work and to become more organic herself, using the words that they did.
Let's talk a bit about that, because once we get into the crux of this week's episode, I don't think we're going to talk about anything else. So let's focus on some of the smaller things first and build up to the main thing, which was the fact that Sam is reporting to her makers. Mm-hmm. And they say at one point, your feelings don't matter to her. And yet their feelings very much seem to matter, because they seem very angry.
Yeah, as Sam describes, the makers have been separated from organics communication and collaboration for such a long time. So it makes me wonder if that disconnect for so long kind of leads them to think that it leads the makers to believe that they're not experiencing things that organics experience, such as feelings. Like, I'm allowed to be angry because I don't see it as anger. You're not allowed to be angry because I see it as anger.
Interesting. And it does bring up the point, I think she's implied, that they are not necessarily descendants of Federation holograms. Like, this is a different alien race that created these photonics. Mm-hmm. And so that means that the Doctor from Voyager and Sam are not necessarily related through technology. They are actually different races or species of light-based beings.
Yeah, and I remember, in the first episodes, the first couple episodes when she came up to the doctor and said, oh, as my mentor, and he was very against that. So I think that this shows more of a nuance of why it's a good idea that she wasn't his mentor, other than the obvious reasons for not being a mentor or not considering the doctor a mentor.
Mm-hmm. This is also the episode where Caleb requests access to her primary systems, and she
Yeah.
just tosses it up to him to do whatever he wants with, which is terrifying because you could rewrite a person with that level of access.
Right. She's so eager. She's so eager to learn. She's so eager to experience. And I don't think that she would have done that to, especially not a student from war college, but I think that she feels that she can trust Caleb. She can depend on Caleb. She feels safe around Caleb. And as we learn later on in the episode, she really does consider this friend group of hers to be like the most important part of her life right now. And so I could see him asking that and her saying, okay, and then just going ahead and giving him that access.
And ideally, it's not permanent access. It was only temporary for that one occasion.
Right. But he did request for her to send her primary access code to his pad so that he could play around with certain things. So I don't know if that was like, what she sent to his pad or iPad, whatever it was, to if that was like a sandbox site, he wasn't really changing anything at that point, or if it was allowing him to continue to access her primary system and to change things around until he figured out how to do what he wanted to do.
That was just the metaphor I was going to use of a staging site, just something for him to play around in and then bring back to her when he feels more confident. It's amazing to me that he was able to make any changes because I presume he'd never seen that interface before and he just went to town with it.
I noticed that too. And I think, the interface, as you saw, it had the keyboard, it had the ASDF keyboard, as opposed to the ASDF comic. But looking at all these different keyboards and the way that the interface was laid out, he was able to just go in and, boop, 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 and change your hair to purple. That wouldn't have been a whoops for me, but hey, you know what? That's teach their own.
Exactly. By the way, a PAD or a PADD is a personal access display device.
Ah, thank you.
I do love that in the future, the idea was that each pad would have like one or two files and you had to carry multiple pads. Because there are episodes where we see on Deep Space Nine, like Jake walking around with just like an armful of pads and then he drops them all on a table, as opposed to just, this is what my father thought iBooks or ebooks were. He thought that you would go to Barnes and Noble and you would buy an ebook and it would just, and then when you were done reading it, you were done and you would have to go buy another ebook. He conflated ebook and e-reader. So he thought you would buy an e-reader that was hard coded to one ebook and that would be it.
So those are really expensive books if that's the case, because an e-reader can be pretty pricey.
Yes, he did not appreciate or understand that, nor did he care to.
Sounds about right for my dad too.
Yeah, good job, Dad. Let's see. Also going on in this episode, let's go ahead and talk about the main thing of this episode. There are other aspects and other topics that we'll get into, but the main thing is something that was foreshadowed in the opening moments when Sam is doing her voiceover, her narration, which is very similar to the TNG episode Data's Day, where he's chronicling a day in the life of an android, which was an awesome episode. And she refers to herself as an emissary. The makers want her to explore human life. And she considers herself an emissary of the photonics to organics. And I found that word very specific and very intentional because the word emissary was applied to the main character of Star Trek Deep Space Nine for all 7 seasons that it ran. Deep Space Nine is one of my favorite, probably my complete, total, and utter favorite Star Trek series ever because it ran in the mid-90s. It was the first time Star Trek had had a black male captain as a main character. The first time, or one of the few, it was the first time that Star Trek had really done serial storytelling where each episode leads into the next, which nowadays in this era of binge watching is typical for everything from Game of Thrones to The Good Place. But back in the 90s, everything was episodic. They were bottle episodes where you can watch them in any order. You can miss an episode. It doesn't matter. Everybody gets reset at the end to their default state. Deep Space Nine was not doing that. They had like a 7-year arc that told a story. Also, the main character, who I have neglected to name, Benjamin Sisko, played by the amazing Avery Brooks. Ben Sisko was a single black father that you don't see very often in the 90s because there's often a stereotype of absent fathers more often than there is absent mothers. And so
Mm-hmm.
for him to be raising his son Jake and to watch Jake get older over the course of the 7 years of the show, like you don't really notice Jean-Luc Picard getting older over the 7 years of the Next Generation. He obviously did, but the older you get, the less you notice each incremental year.
Mm-hmm.
Jake was a kid when Deep Space Nine started, and for him to become a young adult over the course of the series was a marvelous transformation that, and so much more powerful than what we saw with, say, Wesley Crusher, who a lot of people didn't particularly like.
Yeah, yeah, because he with Wesley Crusher, he wasn't on the Next Generation very long, right? I mean, he was to a certain duration, but you didn't see him grow up that way.
Yeah, he came back for 1 or 2 episodes. He was on for many seasons at the beginning, but then he went to Starfleet Academy. But even when he was on the ship, he was often seen as a Mary Sue character or a character who can do pretty much do anything and show up anyone else.
Mm.
So like here's the chief engineer, Joey LaForge, who can't solve a problem, and this kid prodigy comes along and fixes it. And everybody's like, "Oh, Wesley saved the day." And we're like, "Why is the kid doing this when the adult can't?"
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, to be honest, there are a couple of times in this series so far where the cadets are the ones who are like solving these really big problems. And I do have that same question where it's like, so where is this going? Like how when the kids aren't here, how does this ship run?
Yeah, that's something we talked about a little bit last week, where
Mhm.
it was like I like seeing the larger context in which the show is taking place, but it's also unrealistic for the kids to be impacting the larger context in which the show is taking place.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so there's that. But anyway, so all this came to mind when Sam used the word emissary, and then for her class this semester, she decides to solve the mystery of Benjamin Sisko, which is summarized for us, I hope, in a way that was meaningful to you because you've never seen Deep Space Nine.
No, So when it came to Benjamin Sisko, it was a mystery for me too. Like it, so many. I felt like Sam, honestly, because so many people who would go into this episode, such as yourself, you already know about Benjamin Sisko. You know about the family. You know about Jake. You know about what certain things about what had happened or his leadership style. Whereas for Sam, she's reading about all this. She's a researcher, and in previous roles that I've had, vocationally and academically, where I've had to do a lot of research, you're trying to get a semblance of who this person is, and it's coming out of a book or it's coming from, stories that you've heard, and yeah, kind of going back to before when Reno was like, "Who are you?" Like we're trying to find out like who is Benjamin Sisko.
Yeah, and that's something, like you said, that I was intimately aware of. It's one of I feel like this episode was a spoiler for a lot of Deep Space Nine. So for those of you who have not seen Deep Space Nine, if you were to now go back and watch it, you now know a lot of things that happen in the seventh and final season, which
Mm,
is suboptimal in my opinion. This was not a good episode to sell you on Deep Space Nine, in my opinion. It was for those of us who already knew it. Because at
mhm.
the end of Deep Space Nine, Sisko disappeared into a non-linear wormhole where, and by non-linear, I'm referring to the passage of time. When he disappears, he says, I might come back next week. I might come back next year. I might come back yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And so now here we are 1,000 years after Deep Space Nine, and we know he still hasn't come back. His son Jake never saw him again.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an episode of Deep Space Nine in season 4, The Visitor, which was just heart-wrenching because it was about Jake losing his dad.
Oh.
And ultimately, that's what happened at the end of Deep Space Nine. Now, Jake was in a very different place in his life when he ultimately did lose his dad.
Yeah.
But as you and I know, there's no good age at which to lose a dad.
No, there really isn't. I mean, old or young, it doesn't, even though we were just kind of picking on our respective dads earlier, there's still that relationship. And so, I could see Jake being the son of an emissary. It must have come with its own trials and tribulations, of course, because if you're the son of an emissary, well, that emissary's got to go to work and is going to go for however long. And I mean, ultimately forever, or at
Mm-hmm.
least as much as you remember. So yeah, I think it was a story about Sam, but it ultimately became a story about connections, about families, about the different relationships that you have, like between Sam and her makers and Jake and Benjamin.
And we got to see that in ways that I could not have anticipated. I am pretty good about avoiding spoilers on the internet. And even though I saw this episode with you a week after it first aired, I had no idea that any of this episode was going to be at all about Deep Space Nine. And what really blew me away was the involvement of actors and characters from Deep Space Nine, specifically Surik Lofton, who played Jake Sisko. Deep Space Nine
Mm-hmm.
went off the air in 1999 and it is now 2026. So he is now 27 years older. He's in his 40s. He's probably about my age. Probably always has been. And he was in this episode. He appeared
Mm-hmm.
first as a holographic recording talking about his dad. And they really had a very strong relationship, Avery Brooks and Surik Lofton. When they were filming Deep Space Nine, they would go to basketball games together, and Avery Brooks would introduce Surik as his son. Yeah. And
Yeah, and seeing your reaction, like I got to experience your reaction not knowing the context while we were watching this together. And so, being able to see like, oh, this is a really important person, like to hint at paying attention to what this person has to say.
yeah, when he first showed up, I gasped and I said, Jake. And I just was not expecting him. And these are people who they're part of my past. Deep
Mhm.
Space Nine is done. Everything I ever want to see or hear or know about Deep Space Nine already exists, as far as I knew up until 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
I could go back and watch Jake or Ben or any of the other characters say their lines over and over again, but they'll never say any new lines. Which is the same thing when my dad died. One of the ways I thought about it was his book has now been written. There are
Mhm.
no new pages, there are no new chapters. Everything about my dad is now finite. When he was alive, it was his life was a geometrical ray, which is a terminus at one end and an arrow stretching indefinitely in the other direction.
Mhm.
And when he died, that arrow on the other end became another point. And now it's no longer a ray, it's a segment. It's a point here and a point here, and everything in between represents his life. And that's kind of what happens when not to be too melodramatic about it, but that's what happens when a TV show goes off the air,
Mhm.
is that
Yeah.
it becomes a segment. You can only see what exists between the beginning and the end. And now that proved to not be true because Sarah Lofton came back and played Jake Sisko and said new things that I'd never seen or heard before.
As much as I can empathize because losing my own dad, as much as I can empathize with what you were saying about, it becoming a segment, the interpretation, the biggest thing that really shows a difference for me is that, you know, yes, it becomes a segment if you're just reading a book about him or if you're just doing research about him. about your father, about Benjamin Sisko. But as an example, when the teacher was talking about how much Sisko loved tomatoes. And of course, she eats the tomato wrong, but talks about how much Benjamin Sisko loves tomatoes. And later on, Sam says that wasn't in any of the research that I did. So regardless of what's written down about your dad, my dad, what is our interpretation of who this person is? That can shift and change. As I get older, I'm realizing that with my own dad, there are certain things that I interpreted very much one way with the teenager perspective or the child perspective or even the adult perspective. And then after he passed away, I could interpret it very differently. So even that lifespan is fluid, even after somebody is gone, which can be, it's bittersweet, of course, because there's good and bad things that get realized. But I would argue that the segment is only apparent if you're just looking at what the person did, not who they were.
Something my therapist helped me recognize was that my relationship with my father doesn't end just because he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
It does become more one-sided or at least one-directional, but I can still reinterpret the things I understood about him as I grow older and become the age he was. I can learn and recognize and compare and contrast more things.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is that I will never have new material from him because it is still one directional. It's still me interpreting a finite set of data. And so for me to see this character again, there are a lot of people from my past who I'll never see again. And I thought the characters from Deep Space Nine were one of them. And so Jake shows up and he has that holographic, very brief comment about, I can't tell you what kind of an emissary my dad was, but I can tell you what kind of a father he was. And that so I could be that kind of father to my son. And so we found out it's now canon. Jake Sisko grew up and had kids, which I think happened in the books, but the books aren't canon, and now it is canon. It's not canon until it appears in a TV show.
Yeah.
And then he had a more interactive moment with Sam, which we don't necessarily know how that happened. If it was an imagination, like when you open the book, you get this experience. If it was some sort of alien technology, I don't know. But again, we got to see Jake talk to Sam and have that two-way conversation. It's no longer a holographic recording of the past. It's something happening here in the present.
Mm-hmm.
And if I am not getting ahead of you or scooping you, what happened after that conversation with Jake and Sam really hit me hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to get to that. There were a couple of things that I know happened before, and notably for me is Jake being able to note that I can't tell you what kind of emissary he was, even though in Jake's lifetime, he realizes that Benjamin Sisko saved billions of Bajorans. To continue on with that, the first interaction that I note that where Sam made a really ignorant and innocent, but of course intention and impact are different, is going into the Bajoran space and starting to ask all these random questions about Benjamin Sisko, to the point where she's actually saying, why do you believe in this ridiculous story about Benjamin Sisko? And I remember several years ago, Deborah Levine, who created the American Diversity Report, she said, the worst thing you can do is to explain someone's religion to them. So when she's saying all this, I can see it. I can see in slow motion, like how saying what she was interpreting and so incorrectly, as opposed to asking the question of what is the understanding that they have about Benjamin Sisko, that did not go well.
Yeah, she called it nonsense, and she didn't mean to be condescending, but I'm also surprised she would not understand that calling somebody's faith nonsense would be insulting. But I do give her some grace because of how young she is, which can be counted in days, not years.
Yes, yeah. So, which if she was as old as many other people that were at Starfleet Academy, I would hope that she would know better than to approach something that way.
And most of what she had to go on was seemingly a children's book, which
This is
was,
true. Yeah.
as they said, this is a children's book, but Bajorans don't play. Those
Yeah.
kids, yeah.
Yeah, it went really dark really fast in those childhoods.
Yeah. But it was a journey for her. And although that moment was cringe, which is a note I took when we were watching the episode, I wrote, so cringe to watch when Sam went to the Bajor Club. That just established a baseline of just the growth she had to do all up until she had that conversation with Jake where she is literally in tears. She's like, what if I'm not a good emissary? What if I can't do it? Like, yeah, Ben saved billions, but I'm not going to do that. And what if like, if you succeed in saving billions, you sacrifice yourself and you lose. And if you don't save billions of lives, then that's because you've lost. So it's a lose-lose.
Mm-hmm.
And she sees herself in this impossible situation, not just comparing herself to the emissary, but just trying to be what she considers to be an emissary.
Right. Yeah. And what she considers herself to be as photonic and fulfilling the goal of her makers. She's the only person that the makers have created to become an intermediary between photonics and organics. So there's a lot of pressure there. She's the only one. So that makes it really difficult.
Yeah, she said that if she fails, then they'll seal off all contact with the organics forever. This is their one, only, and last shot at establishing two-way communication.
So the makers create Sam, let her incubate for 3 weeks, throw her out and say, oh, by the way, you're the only chance we are going to give with this possible interaction. Like, talk about being set up to fail.
I know, right? Yeah. I mean, they have only themselves to blame for that.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
But I recently saw a video on Instagram about how threatened leaders force high performers to get fired.
Yes.
Maybe they are a little threatened by their own creation and they want her to fail.
Yeah. Yeah. There is in the employment kind of subject, there is that instance of you take high potential employees and you set them up where it's kind of like it's kind of like trying to push a beach ball underwater. And the pressure is so great that when anything, looking for anything to fail, it leaps them out of the water entirely, with the water being the organization. And so using that as an excuse for, whether it be underhanded layoffs or just to reinforce toxic management styles, because usually high performers will point out when they notice toxic behavior, and that's very threatening. Mm-hmm. Whatever the reason is, it's never I don't like saying always never, but it's not usually in the research for a positive result.
But then in the end, she does have that conversation with Jake. And then she goes back to the teacher, who I recognized pretty quickly at the beginning is the actor Tawny Newsome, who is a co-producer on this series and co-author of this particular episode. She was also previously the star of the Star Trek animated series Lower Decks, which ran for 5 seasons. So she did the voice of Mariner. And she has appeared in person in a Star Trek series before, not just the voice, which is one of the reasons I was able to recognize her, even under all that makeup. She was primarily Cardassian, which is the race that was seen here. And there are implications for that I'll get into in a moment. But you pointed out earlier how there are things we don't know about the people who have passed away from our lives. And one of the things that Isla, I believe is the teacher's name, says is, as you said, Sisko grew tomatoes in his home because he believed it was an integral ingredient in gumbo, Creole gumbo. And then she says, how did you know that? And how did you get Jake's book, Anselm, which Jake was working on in Deep Space Nine? And the reveal is she slowly tucks her hair behind her ear. And I didn't know what was happening there. Is she a Vulcan or something? Because they live a long time, but not that long.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see Trill dots. Trills are an alien race that they look completely human, except they have a series of dots running down from their forehead all the way down the side of their body. So you really only see it on the neck because the rest of it's under their clothes. Do you know what trills are? Do I need to explain it to you?
Let's explain it.
Okay. So trills are very humanoid-like. They live a pretty standard lifetime of, like 50 to 100 years. But there is on their home world almost like a slug-like organism called a symbiote. And this symbiote can pair or conjoin with a trill host. And when the host dies, all of their memories and lived experiences are stored in that symbiote. And that is then transferred into a new host. So suddenly a 25-year-old individual, a trill person, can absorb 100 years of memories that the previous host had.
Wow.
And so it doesn't change their personality. They don't get overridden by this slug, but they now have all this experience. And then when that person dies, now there are 2 lifetimes in the slug, and it goes into the third person.
Mm-hmm.
And so Star Trek Deep Space Nine, in the very first episode, we meet a character named Jadzia Dax. She was the 8th host of the Dax symbiote. So she had 7 lifetimes before her. This is why sometimes on Deep Space Nine, Ben Sisko would refer to this young, attractive actor, Terry Farrell, the character Jadzia, as old man, because her previous host was an old man who was a mentor to Ben Sisko. His mentor died, moved into a new host, and became his chief science officer.
Okay.
And so when we see that this teacher on Starfleet Academy is a host of the Dax symbiote, this basically means that the character of Dax that we knew and loved from Deep Space Nine is still alive 1,000 years later and still has all those memories.
Mm-hmm.
And they are a Trill Cardassian hybrid. That's the race that this teacher belonged to. And so it was such an honor for Tawny Newsome to be able to play a character who hasn't been seen on stage or on screen in 27 years. And so brilliant of her to bring Dax back. And as soon as I saw those dots and what they represented, I started bawling because I certainly didn't expect to see Jake Sisko back, and I certainly didn't expect to see Dax back in any form. We have the Doctor from Voyager here, and for Dax to also be here, we don't know if we'll ever see her again. She's on the faculty. Maybe she'll show up in another episode.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just Jadzia was one of my favorite characters. She was so funny and so smart, and the lifetimes of experience that she brought to the show was just amazing. And we've met other hosts of the Dax symbiote before, but not in a long time. And so it was heart-wrenching to know that 1,000 years later, we still haven't seen Ben Sisko. But 1,000 years later, there is one person we haven't lost from that cast.
Yeah, who still remembers Benjamin Sisko with all the intricacies, like liking to grow tomatoes.
I think somebody once said that you die 3 times. Once when you die, the second time when the last person who remembers you dies, and the third time when they stop speaking your name.
Her name, yeah.
And so Ben Sisko might be gone, but his memory still lives on because Dax still remembers him, as you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that really blew me away.
Yeah. Yeah. When she tucked her hair behind her ear and Sam said, "Are you part Trill?" And I just kind of saw you in the periphery and just seeing your reaction to that. Like it was, this is kind of why we talk about Star Trek, right? Is because there are emotions that we feel, that those connections that we feel to the show. And for you, showing that emotion that connected you to this episode because of all those episodes of Deep Space Nine that you watched.
With my dad.
Yeah, with your dad and all the experiences that you had, you know? And it's the same for me with like every time I see a character from the Next Generation, because that was what I watched with my dad. It was like, oh, so this is having a commonality to share emotion is really what makes community. And so having, whether it be a seasoned person in this community, such as yourself, or a cadet, a newbie, such as me, being able to share those emotions and being able to observe what those emotions are and why those are being felt. It's really, it's very telling for me just how much thought goes into the creation of this universe and the continuation of
Mhm.
this universe in this series.
One thing I learned from our friend Sabriel, who used to co-host the show and who also cried when Dax appeared, was that Avery Brooks retired from acting about 13 years ago, has not been in or done any Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
But this episode was done with his blessing and would not have been done without it. So he and Sarah Lofton, Avery Brooks and Sarah Lofton are still very close.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought the script to him and they said, we want to be respectful of you. We want to be respectful of your character. We don't want to suggest that Ben Sisko has come back or is coming back because we know that you're retired and we certainly don't want to put you in any position like that.
Mm-hmm.
But this is how we want to tie up the story of
Mm-hmm.
the Sisko family,
Mm-hmm.
basically. And the lines that you hear Sisko saying, I said to you, Stacy, that I doubt they got him to record anything new. That must be archival footage. I was only half right. It was not new footage that he recorded for this episode, but it
Mm-hmm.
was also not from Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Oh,
It was apparently something he recorded for a jazz album years ago.
wow.
And they were able to find something that they could take out of its original context and still have it make sense in Star Trek.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that really just demonstrates how much you can really transcend different things into Star Trek because of the characters, because of
Mhm.
the people that are in it.
And also
So,
just how much respect the creators of this show have for its lore. There are so many
yeah.
shows out there that are quick cash grabs, but
Mm-hmm.
this is a show that not only is capitalizing on its roots, but is respecting its roots and the people who built those foundations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something you see every day.
Yeah, and this is a really this is a very different juxtaposition of an idea. When we were first introduced to Starfleet Academy in episode 1, and you saw we saw like all the previous names of people who have been in previous series, and you were mentioning, oh well, this was just for the fans. So this feels different. Like talking about Benjamin Sisko, having this quote from him from something outside of the Star Trek universe, having the script writers get his permission and his blessing, having Jake, his son, 27 years later, being introduced again introduced to me, but reintroduced to you, and have it be such an integral part of this episode is so much more than just fan service.
I agree. Yeah, they are really adding a brick to that foundation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was something that hit me really hard, partly because it was so unexpected, but also just because they were really respectful and it landed that way too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, there were some other funny things in the episode, like Kelrek trying to have a rehearsal dinner to impress the Alpharati. And I think that was something that you particularly enjoyed.
Yeah, the soup ritual where they're yelling at each other with the with the megaphones. And finally Reno's just like, I'm not doing this. Like, I'm not having any more of this. But the blobfish in the middle. And at first when the blobfish deflated, Calric accused them of kind of making fun of him. And I was thinking they wouldn't just have this whole elaborate scheme to pick on him, and come to find out it wasn't that. I mean, the blobfish deflated and they all just thought that particular part was funny, but Kelrek interpreted it as them making fun of him and his efforts. And yeah, it showed me, the frailty of Kelrek behind the scenes. He puts on this really tough exterior, and I know people who are like this, very tough exterior, but it's all because of defensiveness. Usually in my experience, that there's usually a reason for that. A lot of times people don't create, or they don't develop this sort of defensiveness that is also, on the flip side, so sensitive without a reason.
And we learned some of that reason. He thinks that Ake abandoned Starfleet all those years ago.
Right. Yeah. So here we finally find out, like, what is the deal with Kelrek to Ake, and seeing her as, seeing it as this kind of failure or abandonment or even betrayal. And he wasn't even there. It didn't directly affect him from my understanding, but it still deeply affected him because of something that he interpreted that had happened, the abandonment.
It's interesting that we would see that happen in this episode, because in the very first episode of Deep Space Nine, Ben Sisko meets Jean-Luc Picard. And Jean-Luc Picard had briefly been assimilated into the Borg as Locutus, and at the Battle of Wolf 359, he was responsible for the destruction of multiple Starfleet ships, which killed some people that Ben Sisko cared and loved for very deeply. So Ben Sisko hated Picard, and Ben Sisko had to come to peace with his own loss before he could respect Picard for who he was and not blame him for what had happened. And we're kind of in the same episode that is so much about Ben Sisko. We're seeing that happen with other characters. We see Kelrek so mad at Ake for something he thinks she did. And to your point, there might be something else there entirely. Like, he's just using her as an outlet. And we also saw Sam talking to the doctor briefly about, how do you get over loss? And he said, you just move on.
Yeah, he had a very, even more abrupt than the doctor usually is. He had a very abrupt and very curt response to that. And, seeing the doctor have emotions, as it were, have an emotional reaction. And it seems that Sam is able to kind of get at that emotion more than what we've seen other people do, because in the first couple episodes, she's talking about, the different people that he had worked with, and she had mentioned one, and he got really, his demeanor really changed, and she said, your sensitivity levels are spiking. And so it seems to me that Sam is able to tap into this emotional state more easily with the doctor than he lets a lot of other people do. And I don't know if he's doing this willingly or not.
Yeah, that earlier reference was to Captain Gwyn of the USS Protostar.
Thank you. I figured you'd remember that. Yeah.
And I suspect that this episode was an indirect reference to Captain Gwyn again, and that we may eventually get at what happened to her. Because the Doctor is 1,000 years old. Everybody he knew and loved pretty much is gone now.
Mm-hmm.
He met Jake Sisko once, and I don't remember exactly how that happened, but everybody from Voyager, Tom Paris, Harry Kim, B'Elanna Torres, all gone. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
he knows their great times 10 grandchildren, but that would be it.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the same is true for the USS Protostar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And we also had, going back to Sam, the vehicle for this episode. You enjoyed watching her get drunk in the bar.
Wow. Yeah, she was sloshed. And uh, first of all, I don't know who could handle 12 shots and not immediately either fall asleep or need to go to the emergency room. But then she starts a bar fight, and there's finally, the teen drama part where Caleb finally gets Tamira out into the alleyway, and we'll talk about that. But also, one thing that I noticed that Sam was laying on the bar, and then all of a sudden she yelled out, "This is my song!" And nobody, like, Genesis was like, "You don't even know what the song is." So just seeing that, just seeing Sam's personality get turned up to 11 because of 12 shots.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an interesting scene. We got to see Jaden as well.
Yes. Oh, I love this. Jaden starts dancing with another man from the War College. One thing is that I noticed that Jaden was wearing I think that's the first time that I'm seeing the ambiguity of the costuming, because Jaden is wearing it. It's a skirt, sort of part of the uniform, and so seeing this kind of budding romance between Jaden and uh, the person from the War College is really great to see. And then, of course, we have the blowing hot and cold of Caleb and Tamira. So, yeah, yay hormones.
Yeah.
That was the note that I made.
Yeah, I like Jaden. I like just seeing somebody being friendly with the War College, whether or not it's romantic, which in this case it is, of course, romantic.
Yeah.
And also, to your point, the apparel in the early seasons of TNG, we saw men wearing skirts. We also see Jaden wearing a hoodie, which seems
Yeah.
unusual in the world of Star Trek. So, yeah, I like all the things that he brings to the show, especially as a Klingon, because it just goes against stereotype.
Right. Yeah, very much so.
Hmm. Also, we got to briefly hear from Stephen Colbert inviting all the students to Morningwood. Which was, I mean, he laughed at his own joke. And so I really felt like Stephen Colbert was being Stephen Colbert as opposed to the digital dean. And I'm not sure that joke belongs in Star Trek, yet I still enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not going to say that it fits the flow of the series, but it certainly still made me laugh.
Overall, this was a wonderful episode. A large part of it was getting Sam to understand that before she can understand other people, she needs to understand herself. And I think we saw that when she was in tears at the end and then went back to the makers with her decision. And the fact that we were able to see this character grow so much in one episode while also bringing closure to the fans who have spent the last 1,000 years wondering what happened to Captain Sisko. Yeah, this was completely out of left field, entirely unexpected,
Mm-hmm.
and just so meaningful and so impactful. And I'm going to recommend that everybody who has ever watched or enjoyed Deep Space Nine go watch Starfleet Academy. Just like how I recommend everybody who liked Voyager go watch Prodigy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've already been talking for about an hour. Shall we rush through the next episode, episode 6, which is Come Let's Away?
Oh yeah, they're going right into episode 6. I mean, there was some sexy times going on.
Yeah, it opened up with Caleb and Tarima in bed, and I my high school experience was very different. I went to a private Catholic school. I was a good little boy, and I did not have the escalation of relationships that these two are having. So I was like, all the more power to them. If they're enjoying it, great. But I was just surprised that they showed us these characters. I know they've been flirting around each other for a while, but
Hmm.
other than that, from their first real kiss last episode to this, it kind of feels like we didn't get to watch the relationship blossom. It just went from 0 to 60.
Well, I yes, definitely agree with that. But I also would say that like that's kind of what's to be expected, at least for me, when it comes to developmental standpoint, because I mean, they got 21, 18-year-old brains. Their brains are still malleable and still very susceptible to hormones. Um, and I went to public school in rural Ohio, but still, I don't remember any particular relationship that I had that went that fast, that quickly. But also, for the last 5 episodes, there's been all this tension between them, and they've been kind of blowing hot and cold anyway. The thing that really just killed the mood for me was uh, when right before their what led to be a really big blow up between the two of them, seeing that animatronic creepy bear, he's back. I can't handle it out of nowhere.
You don't like it?
No, oh my
Okay.
word. It's like way too like Five Nights at Freddy's similarities.
I don't know that series. I know that my 7-year-old nephew loves it.
Oh, yeah, that's another thing that I probably would have been at that age too, but now it just creeps me out.
So in this episode, the War College and Starfleet Academy are invited to basically a game. It's a trial session on the USS Miyazaki, which is a
Mhm.
ship that lost all hands on deck, about 275 people, I think, when they tried to engage a singularity drive, which is unlike traditional warp drives, which use dilithium, are more akin to how the Romulans power their warp drives,
Mm.
which is through a singularity, aka a black hole. It's a small, contained, likely artificial black hole. For some reason, it didn't work for the Miyazaki. They were trying to find alternative propulsion systems after the burn, which destroyed all dilithium. This apparently was one attempt that failed. And now they're using the place where all these people died as a training ground for students.
Yeah, that. Not really sure what to make of that. And, like, oh, all these people died, so let's turn it into essentially a game. And I wasn't, that didn't sit very well with me for sure.
Nor I, but apparently everybody there is fine with it. We also had some adult staff that we've never seen before. I think from the War College, who was placing bets on who was going to do things faster and whatever. And the adults
Mhm.
were like, they were making a game of it. They were like, one extra duty shift if they win or if they lose. And I was like, Really?
Yeah,
That's
yeah. And even Ake got into it. She was making bets too. So I mean, had this happened long ago enough that things can be made into training exercises? I mean, like I can see buildings that were built 300 years ago, 300 years ago, being used as training exercises for military or what have you, but not necessarily a place where every soul on board perished.
right. Yeah. But then again, we made a museum out of Pearl Harbor, so who knows?
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Not long into their exploration of the Miyazaki, when they bring the ship back online, they are attacked by the Furies, which is a race you and I have seen in a different sci-fi franchise.
Yeah, it sounds very much like the Reavers from the Firefly series.
Yeah, they had a weird visual effect where they seemed to like leave a ghost behind whenever they moved, but otherwise they are just cannibals that can't be reasoned with. These Furies do have language, which the Reavers did not seem to, but
Mhm.
otherwise the similarities are marked. And I'm not saying that Firefly invented the concept, but it's definitely reminiscent of, for me, in the literature and the sci-fi that I've consumed.
Yeah, yeah, having a lot of the similarities, and yeah, to your point, the Furies, they had this kind of like clicking sort of language, sort of bug or insect like, maybe even, amphibian like. But when it comes to the similarities with the Reavers, it's like, um, it looked as though they manipulated their bodies and their faces to look more scary or what have you, just like the Reavers did. And although the Reavers, to your point, didn't have a language, they just kind of yelled at each other, I think.
Hmm.
But yeah, that irrational, belligerent, cannibal sort of behavior, was very, it was very reminiscent for me.
Hmm. And the Furies become the reason why they bring back to this episode Nus Braka,
Oh, Paul Giamatti.
the villain from the pilot.
Yep, Nus Braka, he's back, baby.
Yeah, and he does that role so, so well.
Yeah, he's having a lot of fun with it. And I particularly like the upgrade of his haircut in this episode. He has the tic-tac-toe game on that's been shaved into the side of his head.
Yeah, if it was there before, I certainly didn't notice it, and I don't know why he has it now, but good for him.
He still has all of the rings and finger cover things, which they remind me of, with mummification in ancient Egypt. They would put uh, gold fingertips on the mummies before
Mhm.
before they would put them in the sarcophagus. And so he's like clicking around with all these little metal things. And yeah, he's having Paul Giamatti is having a really great time with this.
I hope so, because he's very good at it.
He is, yeah.
But he has a real Silence of the Lambs moment with Chancellor Ake, where it's just the two of them, and she just sits there and lets him say whatever he wants, and he is incisive, if that's the word, because like a surgeon going into her and her history and how her son died, which we knew from an earlier episode. And she just sits there, and I couldn't believe how cold she was being and how heartless she was being and not responding at all. And I had to wonder, what was her pulse like? What was her blood pressure like? What was she thinking? How was her breathing? Because she may have controlled it all well, but how did she react? And it seems like she was reacting the same way that Black Widow does when she's interrogated, which Black Widow pretends to be held captive, but she's really the one doing the interrogating. Once she gets what she needs, she breaks loose and was like, "Great, thanks, bye."
Yeah, exactly. Like, who who's in control of this situation? Nus Braka, who is talking about how Ake's son, he sent out an SOS, but she stayed with her ship and then he died. And really digging in on that. And Ake's just sitting there. And I for me, just the emotionless, because she's such an emotive person otherwise, her emotionless response to Nus showed me that, like, it hinted to me that she had something up her sleeve. An ulterior motive of letting him go on and on this way.
And ultimately, she was the one who was played because she said he slipped up. I found out that he needs us as much as we need him. He's afraid of the Furies just like we are. He can't
Mhm.
control them. And I had said to you earlier, Stacy, I bet they're working together.
Yeah. And even at one point, Ake was like, something's not right. I don't know what it is, but there's something that's not right. And they keep going with, what they're saying. They even give Nus a pardon so that he can get some of what he is demanding to be able to help them.
Just temporarily.
Yeah.
His warrant was put on hold for the duration of the parley.
Mm-hmm.
And they did give him that we would stop distributing dilithium to this planet, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he basically got what he wanted until he got what he really wanted, and then all bets were off because yeah, he was playing Ake the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. And like when he sent out that encrypted message and it was translated into they took the bait,
Bon appetit.
Yeah. Oh goodness. Yeah. And the bon appetit to me, it's like he knows they're gonna get eaten, So yeah, it's just he said that Nuss said that he hated Ake so much. And at the first on the first episode when they were going to trial and Ake had sentenced the mom and Nus said to Caleb, hold on to that hate. It will keep you warm at night. So Nus must live in a very cold compartment if he's trying to build up that much hate to stay warm, because you could really see with this interaction between the two characters, between Braka and Ake, that Braka has this, for me, such an exaggerated amount of hatred, and not exaggerated as in it's fake, but it's been snowballed. It's been magnified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that she originally sentenced him to prison in the first episode, but he's clearly done well for himself since then. You would think that he would let go of the hate, but he says that hating her makes him stronger and better. And he says, you're the best teacher I've ever had.
Yeah, which is what the Dalai Lama said about Chairman Mao. Actually, he said that Mao was his best teacher because it taught him patience. So, like, is Ake, and Braka that kind of dynamic, or what is the lesson that Braka is wanting to learn from this? If he learned so much, if Ake was such a great teacher.
And he clearly learned already how to play her because he got exactly what he wanted. But I am a bit confused that the whole plot, the whole purpose was to lure the USS Saratoga away from that starbase because the Saratoga went down pretty fast. And if that was the only defense that starbase had, I don't think they had to lure it away. I think they could have just taken it anyway.
Yeah, they could have. But I think it was because of the distance. They could only be within 1 light year. So and that's why the Saratoga was chosen. So I don't know if around the Saratoga there's a lot more that are within 1+ light years that could come to their defense if they were getting attacked.
I'm not sure I'm following.
So with the Saratoga, when he was making his demands, he said that Braka said that the only ships that were allowed to help would be within 1 light year, or because of the timing, they could only be within 1 light year, and the Saratoga was the only ship that was available to that. Yeah, and fact check me on that.
I mean, that was part of that was why they chose the Miyazaki, because they knew the Saratoga would come to help them.
Mm.
But apparently the Saratoga, what I'm saying is that even if the Saratoga had stayed at the starbase, they could have just skipped the Miyazaki. They could have skipped all this theatrics, and the Furies and Nus Braka could have just gone and attacked the starbase with Saratoga in dock and taken whatever they wanted, because the Saratoga was not strong enough, as we saw, to fend off almost anybody.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think Braka, if he hates Ake so much, why not get a twofer? Why not take out this base and Ake at the same time? And this kind of allowed him to do that. So I could see Braka's ulterior motive is, yeah, I could take the Saratoga at any time, but Ake is going to be involved in this too, and I can also beat her. Then I'm going to go for it this way. So that might have been the reason why he chose to attack in this particular manner, was not only to overtake the Saratoga, but also to hurt Ake in the process.
I wonder how he got the Furies to agree to all that, just because they could eat the... By the way, I've been saying Saratoga. I was mistaken. It's the Sargasso.
Oh.
So that's my bad.
Oh, yeah. Well, Sargasso being the thank you for that, being the ship. But yeah, I mean, if we're comparing the Furies to Reavers, the Reavers don't have a reason to attack other than the satisfaction of attacking. Maybe that's the same with the Furies. Maybe that was enough.
I'm looking at Wikipedia because Memory Alpha does not yet have a summary of this episode. And it says that he had them attack the Miyazaki in an elaborate trap to get revenge on her and Starfleet.
Ah, yeah.
So I think you were correct. They stole something from that starbase. We don't know what yet, but the rest of it was revenge, which seems petty, but okay.
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily see Braka as above being petty.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about what happened on the Miyazaki?
Yeah. Yes. Let's talk about what happened on the Miyazaki.
Yeah, they fed some comic books into the ship because the ship was trying to save its crew, which implies a level of intelligence that I'm not accustomed to from Starfleet ships, but hey, it's 1,000 years in the future. And they erect some force fields and blah, blah, blah. But the main thing that happened is Terima using her Beta Z powers to connect with Caleb and tell him what to do and to run tiny fireflies program on the ship and blah, blah, blah. You know, they were using Terima as a backup in case the Sargasso didn't work, and I kind of wish they'd just gone with her as the primary plan to begin with.
Yeah, I think that, it wasn't so obvious to me why she stayed behind until later on, and I was like, oh, so that it could be used as a plot point. But Terima was having, it's such a whirlwind of emotions where she accidentally looks into Caleb's head at the beginning of the episode. And then, she's doing this as an accident and it caused this much emotional damage to their relationship. But ultimately, she does it again to save him. And she tears out the regulator in her neck in the process to try to reach him more and to be able to ultimately attack the Furies too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We also saw some repartee forming between Caleb and one of the Vulcans.
Bobby, yeah.
Yeah, so he was getting along with them. They quoted Spock, and ultimately he gave his life. And when Terima, I think that's part of what set her off also, was seeing that one of her war college classmates, who's also, pretty much a kid, die. That contributed to her tearing out her implant, which we learned is also why her father is deaf.
Yes, right.
Which was devastating to know that you could accidentally do that to your own parent.
Yeah.
And I was really touched by her line to Caleb, which was, "You probably won't want to date me after this, but at least you'll be alive."
Yeah.
And then she basically becomes a banshee and screams the Furies to death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And just seeing the anguish, I think that's really what I envision when it comes to how banshees, or in this case how Tarima just does this scream, and it's so effective, but it's really just a ball of anguish that she's really releasing, and it ends up killing a whole bunch of cannibals, so that's fun.
And it kills them in a very targeted way. Nobody from Starfleet or the War College is affected by her outburst.
Mm-mm. Yeah, yeah, and being able to really hone in that much from that far away, it ultimately puts her in shock, and she ends up being in critical condition.
In a coma, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly what's going to happen to her and also to her relationship with Caleb, but this was really, I think, in my opinion, one of the episodes of this show that focused more on the adults. This was more about Ake and Nucifer.
Lucifer.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. I had it on my list to try to slide in there at some point.
Yeah. And it's a dark episode. It was chilling. The last episode before this was very about inner exploration and maturation and discovery and philosophy and closure. And this episode was about tearing open old wounds and making sure people bleed. And literally and figuratively, both Ake and Tarima had to deal with what they've done to their loved ones in the past.
Mm,
Ake let her son die when the burn happened. Tarima deafened her father permanently. Like
hmm
these were things that they did and now have to live with and face over and over the repercussions of it and whether or not they are willing to do that again. Because in this episode, Tarima made the decision that, yes, I will do this again and I will kill people by doing so. And Ake made the decision, no, I will not do this again. I will not let my son die. This time her son is Caleb. She did
hmm
everything she could to save him. And Nucifer said, this time it's just the opposite. Your son lived and everybody else died.
Died. Yeah, yeah.
So this whole episode was about whether or not you want to make the same decision again. And Tarima said yes to good effect, in my opinion. And Ake said no to bad effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having these sort of when you get an opportunity to redo something, those occurrences are rare in the first place. But having them both happen in this episode and showing how differently the outcome can be is really, I think it really demonstrates a nuance to this show.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And now they've made new decisions and they need to live with those. And Ake needs to live with all the people at the starbase who were killed and on the Sargasso. And Tarima has to deal with the people that she killed and whether or not Caleb will see past that or be grateful for it or be scared of it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if I was Caleb, I kind of see that as a little hot, but that's just me.
I would see it not hot in the attractive sense, like, wow, my girlfriend can kill people. That is scary. But
Yeah.
but if I had the maturity that Caleb probably doesn't, just because he's so young, I would probably
Mm.
think, oh my God, my partner sacrificed so much to save me.
Hmm.
And I wouldn't be able to overlook that. I would be sad for her and humbled by it. And I
Hmm.
would want to help her recognize that she made the right decision and how grateful I am, even though it cost her so much.
Right. Yeah. And other people would also see that as being very intimidating. Like
Yes.
she went this far out of her, she did this intense of a thing for my life. And if somebody doesn't feel that their life is worth very much, and somebody else is willing to kill for it to save it, it can create a real dynamic that is very uh it's very traumatic, and it ends up with a lot of really deep wounds.
Which we also saw with Bobby. Remind me, it was in front of Caleb that he jumped to save?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we see one person dying to save Caleb and another person killing to save Caleb.
Hmm.
And I hope Caleb understands, like, it's almost like in Private Ryan, Saving Private Ryan, people died to save Private Ryan, and he now needs to spend the rest of his life earning those sacrifices.
Right. Yeah. And that, the survivor's guilt that happens.
Yeah.
The survivor guilt that happens, how does that play out with the dynamic? Both, not just with Caleb and Tarima, but the War College itself, Bobby being a representative of the War College.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an episode that brought up a lot of questions. I'm sure we'll see Mustafa again. Probably not this season, but surely in future seasons.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of that, in the first season of Firefly, I say that like as if there were others. There was a villain that we saw twice, which was surprising. And in all of TOS, there was only ever one episode or one villain we saw twice, Harvey Mudd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we ended up seeing him on Discovery as well.
Oh.
Yeah, so I said Harvey, I meant Harry, Harry Mudd. His full name was Harcourt Fenton Mudd. He appeared in TOS, TAS, and Discovery. But as far as TOS goes, he was the only recurring villain. And now we've already seen Nus Braka in episodes 1 and 6.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, episode 1 itself was set in two different time periods, about 15 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen him multiple times now, and I doubt that the writers will let a character like that fade away.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he just does too good of a job to be able to only show up at certain occasions. So, but if it does fall into that trope of there's only going to be one villain and we're going to keep going back to him and it's going to be the same over and over again with just in different ways, the supposed, or, the heroes are put into these awful positions as tests for the villain's whims, being able to, I hope it doesn't fall into that pit.
Yeah. Well, I think Sam in the previous episode said that Starfleet has encountered over 4,000 sentient species,
Mm-hmm.
and not even counting the billions that Ben Sisko saved, there are trillions of life forms out there. It's inevitable that you encounter the same ones over and over because the universe is also very small.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so would that increase the 6 degrees of separation, or would that just make it smaller because of how many people that are out there?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Anything else about this episode?
There was something about this episode that tied in with the last episode that I really appreciated. And I think I could see the creators of the series doing this for 2 reasons. One is a reminder that we are ultimately watching a show that has young adults, teenagers in it, as well as to welcome folks like myself that are very new to the Star Trek universe. And both episodes, you learn about what happened to Benjamin Sisko, and then also you learn about what happened to the USS Miyazaki through a book. With episode 5 being a children's book, Sam's reading a children's book, and episode 6, there's a comic book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, these stories from Starfleet's past become canon isn't the right word, but it becomes part of the lore of the inhabitants of the universe, not just the lore of the fans and the viewers, but their own lore and their own myths. And kids grow up reading about the Miyazaki, and whether they see it as something that promotes Starfleet ideals or just mindless propaganda, people can't escape it. They read it, and it becomes part of their common shared mythology.
Yeah. And we're learning that along the way.
Yeah. And I'm glad to be learning it with you.
Yeah, you too. And I'm glad that, with Miyazaki, that I remember you looked this up, and that's the first time that the Miyazaki was ever put in a Star Trek episode. So learning about the Miyazaki together was a good experience for me too.
Yeah, there are always new ships being introduced, and sometimes they mention the Discovery, like when the starbase was attacked, Discovery was picking up the survivors, and Discovery, of course, had 5 seasons of its own TV show set in this same era. Like we've already seen Tig Notaro and Admiral Vance, so we've seen some characters from Discovery, and we'll probably see more. But yeah, every now and then you just have to introduce new characters and new ships because it is a big universe and not all of them are going to be the Voyager J or the Enterprise L. Eventually they just make a new ship. And I think the Sargasso and the Miyazaki were that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing what other new ships we'll encounter. We have 2 more episodes of Transporter Lock to record this season, 4 more episodes of Star Trek Starfleet Academy Season 1, and we will be here on the Transporter Lock podcast to review them and discuss them.
Sounds great.
Until next time.
Find something you love and do it the best you can.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on iTunes and keep your hailing frequencies open by following us on Twitter @TransporterLock or subscribing to our podcast and email newsletter at transporterlock.com.
I forgot to mention one thing I loved about the Emissary episode was the closing credits were played to the Star Trek Deep Space Nine theme song.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to throw that in real quick?
I just did.
Oh, well then there you go.